Most startups don't fail because of product. They fail because they can't articulate to the market what the value is and who it's for. And if the audience can't place you in their mind, then you don't really exist to them. Today, I'm going to show you how you can solve this through positioning. We're going to break down what brand and product positioning is, why it matters for startups, and how you can engineer yours starting today. Because if you don't engineer your positioning, then the market will assign one for you, and usually that won't help you very much. Now, most founders think positioning is branding, but it's not. It's not taglines, it's not website copy, it's not a visual identity. It's a matter of fact statement of how the market perceives you relative to alternatives. And that perception can become your growth ceiling or your growth floor depending on how you frame it. And so it's really important that we execute our positioning with the utmost care and intention. If the market perceives you as just another tool or a cheaper version or a different version of an existing product, then that's the box that you live in. And most founders don't think this is a problem because they think that the game is about optimizing their features. But the real game is about real estate ownership in the minds of your audience. There are limited slots in your customer's mind. When someone hears your name, do they immediately know who it's for, why it matters, what category it belongs in, or how it's different and not better than other products on the market? If they don't get this from hearing your name, then you're pretty much invisible. And here's a quick rule that I go by. If I can't tell if a product is valuable for me or I can't understand what it can do in about 10 seconds, then I move on. It's not the audience's job to deduce these things. They're not detectives. It's your job as a founder to present the information in a simple way so they can understand and deduce as fast as possible whether this is valuable for them. Put it for them on a silver platter, give them the silver spoon, load it up with the information, and pretty much feed it to them. That's all you have to do. And ultimately, relevance beats superiority. There are products out there that are nowhere near as good as other products, but they do far better because they are more relevant in the minds of their audience, and they're much more discoverable and easily accessible to their audience. So ultimately, what you need to do is position yourself as a necessity and not another option on the shelf. There are 4 layers to positioning, and they are context, differentiation, moat, and the positioning statement. And we'll go through each one in this video. But to start off, let's look at the context, because positioning cannot happen in a vacuum. By nature, positioning is how the market perceives your product or your brand relative to alternatives or competitors in that market. And so we really need to understand the context of where we sit, understand the battlefield, and that way we can ultimately make the best positioning statement possible for our product. And the first thing is understanding the audience. So who are these people? Now, first and foremost, it is important to be specific with your audience. Startups is not a good audience segment to create a good positioning statement. Neither is consumers. We should be very, very clear. For example, pre-seed to seed startups doing below 5 million ARR. That is a much clearer, distinguished audience segment than just saying startups. And the reason is because different audiences have different pains, desires, motivations, behaviors, and demographics, the 4 items that we want to understand about our audience. And once we understand our audience deeply, we can create positioning statements and marketing and messaging material that is going to align and resonate with those people so they can understand whether this product is the right thing for them. Because ultimately, if they don't understand the value behind the product, what it can do for them, and why it's the best solution for them relative to competitors, it's going to be very hard for us to convert them into a paying customer. So that's the first thing, is the audience, right? We need to get very specific here. The second thing is the product. Now, I like to undergo this exercise called product mapping, which is essentially understanding the capabilities, so what the product can do, the features, how it does those things, and the benefits. What is the good that can come of doing these things? And what you can do after that is link those back to the audience characteristics, like their pains, desires, motivations. So you can create an emotional link between the product and the audience. And you can supplement that emotional link with logical truth, like case studies and numbers from what your product can do, etc. So that's 2 out of the 3 pieces of context knocked out. The third is understanding the market, the trends, the competitors, the wider landscape. If we don't understand what is happening in the wider world of our sector or the world that our audience lives in, right? Because we really have to understand the day by day of our audience, what they go through, what their day looks like, how we can make this product help them with their lives, etc. We don't understand that, and this is where we can understand this material, right? What does the market look like? What does the competitive landscape look like? Again, ultimately, positioning is about how you look relative to your competitors and to alternatives. So if we don't understand what that looks like, it's going to be very hard to create a positioning statement that's going to separate us and differentiate us from the market. So what are the current trends and shifts in the market? What is happening within this sector? What do our competitors look like? Who are they? Who are they serving? What positioning are they taking up? What stories are they telling their audiences and their customers? What category of product are we competing in, if any? What does that category look like? What is the standards that this category competes on? All these things are extremely important. We just need to understand the lay of the land. Again, we can't fight a battle unless we understand where we are fighting and who we are fighting against. That is the context that we need to basically understand. So now we'll move on to differentiation, and there are multiple axes for differentiation. The first is through your audience or user segment differentiation. Now this comes in two pockets. The first is over-servicing a very specific sub-niche of the wider audience you're looking to target, and the second is providing a totally new user experience. An example of over-serving a sub-niche would be, if we take the previous example actually, is pre-seed startups who have yet to raise their initial seed round and are looking for support on aligning their story for their next raise. Very, very specific subsection of the market. A new UX could just be something that the market has never seen before for that audience segment. For example, Be Real, which was a social media app that came out with a dual camera where you would take a picture of yourself and what you're doing at the same time. That's not a moat by any means, but it was different, and that differentiation allowed it to kind of get some virality, and sooner or later Instagram managed to kind of build that feature and destroy the product. But it was a totally new user experience that allowed itself to capture the market and capture that attention. Now the second part of differentiation could come from the product. So here we like to look at two things. First is features, and the second is value proposition. Now when it comes to differentiating on features, you have to be very, very careful here, because in the long run, most features can be copied, as we just seen in the previous example. Be Real came out with this fun feature, quite novel, but no moat by any means. Instagram came and copied it and killed the product. When it comes to value proposition, this is where you're likely going to differentiate if you're looking at differentiating by the product, because this is where you can provide something that incumbents might not. For example, you could be competing in an industry where speed is the big form factor, right? Product needs to be very, very fast, and that's a value proposition. But if you came out with a more secure product for a specific subsection of the audience who care about that, then that's a new value proposition that you can compete on and differentiate your product that way. So there's different ways to do it. And the third point of differentiation is concept. And this is usually coming down to category or brand. So what category does this product exist in? What brand thesis do you have? What does the brand look like? Is it any different than anything else on the market? There's a lot of different ways you can look about this kind of axis of differentiation. Now, if we take category, for example, there's different categories of product. For example, there's banks and there's neobanks and there's crypto banks and a lot of in between. The overall category is a bank, and you can create subcategories that you can own for yourself. Now, if you have the luxury of being able to somehow create a new category of product, it can be a very powerful tool because you own all the mind share about that category. For example, when neobanks came out, Revolut and Monzo were the big winners in mindshare, and obviously now we have Nubank and other banks like Starling and whatnot. But you have a lot of competitive advantage in owning the mindshare around that category and basically becoming a category leader right off the bat. The only downside is obviously you have a lot of education debt that you might have to catch up on, which is an important thing to consider. If you don't have the resources to educate mass market and you are going for a mass market, then that can be tough. But if your market is slightly smaller, slightly more niche, it's a pretty good way to try and position your product. You could also look at the brand. So have you got like some sort of differentiated brand like Liquid Death, who basically sell canned water but with a very cool brand behind it, which gives it an opportunity to differentiate itself from others in the market. Now, another thing that you could look at is counter positioning. When you exist in a category of product, you're likely going to see similarities between different competitors in that market, and they will normally compete on a set of standards. Now, if we want to take an example of this, you can look at crypto as a very good one. Layer 1 blockchains, not to get technical or anything, but things like Ethereum. Everyone was competing with Ethereum on how expressive a developer can be, how general purpose smart contracting platforms wanted to just give developers everything that they wanted. What people like Solana did was come in and say, well, no, we are going to compete in this category, but we're going to compete on our hyper advantages, and we're going to compete on a new standard, which is speed. And now a lot of new blockchain companies are looking to be the fastest provider as opposed to the most general and developer friendly. And that's just a way of counter positioning against incumbents in a way that they will have to change their business to catch up. And now Ethereum still has to think about how it wants to tackle that problem, because their technology is fundamentally architecturally different than Solana's, which means it's not as fast. So if they want to catch up and be as fast as them, they have to think about other routes. And that can be a very powerful tool. So counter positioning in a way that allows you to differentiate yourself and compete against other incumbents on different standards, that separates you from them, but also means that if they want to chase you and follow you, they will have to spend time, resources, and take away from their core business to do so. So it's a very powerful thing that you might be able to undergo if you have that opportunity. And ultimately, these three things, category, branding, and counter positioning, are extremely important to consider, because if you don't attack the standard in a crowded category or in a crowded market, you're likely going to end up becoming another option if you don't do all the other steps right. And that's the last thing you want to do. The goal of our positioning is to make sure that we become a necessity for our specific audience segment and not another option on the shelf that they just get to choose from. Now, positioning without defensibility will just collapse. And so you should understand what moats can be available to you so you can build towards them. Not every company will have their moats right off the bat, of course, but you should understand what they might be. So as you grow and as you scale, you can lean into those directions and build defensibility for your product as you go. Now, the 7 most common startup moats are as follows. Now, the first is economies of scale. This is essentially the power to lower your costs and become more competitive as you scale. So, for example, if you're building an actual physical product, the more that you scale your business, the cheaper it will be for you to create that product or conduct any sort of logistical activities like shipping or packaging or whatever it might be. So that's one moat that you might have over competitors, that you'll be able to do things the cheapest from an operational point of view and outcompete people operationally. The second one is network effects, and this is predominantly for software companies and tech startups, where as more users come onto the platform or enter the ecosystem, the product gets better. So think about things like YouTube, where when more people come to YouTube, more videos are created, so more users can come on board because more videos are created, and the whole ecosystem gets better and better. So network effects is an extremely important one that you can do, especially when you have a two-sided marketplace like YouTube, social media, etc., where you need demand and supply. But this can also affect other sorts of products as well. The third one is a gated resource. So have you got a resource that is unattainable by anyone else and can only be accessed by you? And this could be proprietary tech, it could be talent, it could be a network and connections that no one else will have apart from you. It could be rights, etc. So are there any gated resources you have available? Number 4 is product stickiness. This is a really important one. Product stickiness is a great moat. How sticky is this product? When someone comes to your product, is it easy for them to just switch to a competitor? A high cost of switching is a very, very good moat to have, because if people can just come to your product and they don't like it and they just go somewhere else, you might see a higher churn than normal. But if you think about things like the Apple ecosystem, where you buy an iPhone or a MacBook and an iPad, and then you have your iCloud, and then it's all connected. And if I want to go to an Android, I got to take everything from my iCloud and port it over there, and it can be a bit of a hassle. So cost of switching being high is a great moat to have. You can improve this for your product just kind of by building out the ecosystem slowly, making sure that people have like a very strong emotional connection and a logical connection to your product as well. Product stickiness is a whole kettle of fish in itself, but definitely worth exploring. There's always a way to make your product more sticky. Number 5 is counter positioning. I think we covered this earlier. We position our product, or we do things that incumbents find it hard to do, or that will cause them some difficulty to do if they were to just try and implement it immediately. So again, for example, let's say there's someone creating toys in a specific set of colors, and we have a unique color that no one can access apart from us, and we go and do that, and now our incumbents in the market can't really chase us to do that. That's a very high level example, but essentially, can we compete on different standards and do something that other people can't do without a high cost incurred to them? Number 6 is my personal favorite and is executional efficiency. Can we execute better than every other person in the market? If you do this, there is very little chance that you will fail in a big way. If you can execute better than your competitors, than the incumbents, if you can move faster or ship high quality product consistently, you're going to have an extremely strong moat. Most of the successful founders that I know are just extremely good at executing, and that's how they get to where they are. It's not about dilly-dallying and waiting for things to fall into their lap. They go get it, they execute, and they make a big deal out of it. So execution efficiency is extremely important. And finally, the last one here is brand. We spoke about brand earlier with the example of Liquid Death. Brand is a good mode to have. You can have a differentiated brand, and like people can resonate with your brand on an emotional level as well, not just having fancy colors, but with all the works that comes with it. Now, the brand moat comes last because a lot of the time people think that brand is just design and colors and haha, but actually a combination of all of these. A brand in logistics will only be a strong brand if they can execute properly and they have strong network effects and they have economies of scale. That is the brand. The brand has a lot of intangible things that a consumer won't directly experience, but will contribute to the overall experience with that brand. And so the reason why it's last on this list as a moat is because actually the culmination of a lot of these things do form the brand itself, and that is the ultimate intangible moat. Your positioning and your moat should be aligned, right? Your positioning helps you cut yourself from the market, and your moat helps you keep that corner or keep that piece of the market for yourself. So once you've got all the pieces together, you can then go and formulate your positioning statement. And I prefer this structure. We have our user, so for insert user segment who struggle with insert problem. Our product is insert category that provides benefit. Unlike alternative, we differentiate. This allows you to kind of hit all the points that you need to effectively differentiate and carve out your position in the market and show users that you are a necessity in some realm for them. Now, here's a quick example of that. So instead of being an AI-powered analytics platform, your positioning statement might look like this. For B2B founders looking to scale past 5 million ARR, so already aligned your specific user segment, who can't afford a full-time RevOps team, already now identified a very painful problem. We are a lightweight revenue intelligence platform, telling them what you are. That turns pipeline chaos and into clear weekly decisions that makes you more money. So this is like the desired benefit, you want to make more money, and this is like the tangible, like what can I actually do for you today, and you just want to connect those two. So the reason that these are different colors is because this is something that is tangible but might not have a strong emotion attached, and then you can attach that strong emotion with obviously making you more money or doubling your revenue or whatever that might be. And then at the end we have unlike alternatives, so unlike enterprise tools, which are overwhelming. So the difference is we are not overwhelming. This is like a much more structured positioning statement. You can play with things like this and tweak it however you like, but this is just a good way to keep things tight, specific, and make sure that your positioning is strong and not kind of weak and floppy. So let's take some maths into the equation. Let's say that we have just ran an email campaign of, let's say, 5,000 leads. And from that, we have, let's say, 50 come to our landing page. And of that, let's say 10 convert. Now, if we make our positioning much tighter and our messaging much cleaner and aligned with that positioning, these 5,000 leads are already targeted set of individuals. These are all going to be B2B founders anyway, because you're not going to do a general broad stroke email campaign. So out of the 50 that land, you might be able to increase your conversion rate by probably, let's say, to 20. And this 2x's your conversion, and it decreases your CAC by 50%. So just by aligning the positioning and getting the messaging really tight and making sure that when people land on the site, that they understand that this is the right thing for them, we can increase our conversions and reduce our client acquisition costs, which is ultimately very good for us. Positioning is an engineered perception of how your product stands up relative to its competitors. It requires context, differentiation, and the idea of how you can build a moat. It's built on the right context and finding the right points of differentiation and accentuated by any moats that you have as a company. If you don't define your positioning, the market will end up positioning you. And usually that doesn't end very well. So take the time to build your own frames, set the perception, and give the market the rose-tinted glasses that they should look at your product and brand through. And if you found this video valuable, feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe, and share this with any founders who might be facing the same problems. And if you're looking for dedicated support around structuring the positioning and storytelling for your company, feel free to get in touch with me in the link below.